We quickly welcome Professor Swaran Singh from School of International Studies, JNU. Thank you very much, Professor Singh. Point taken, sir. Professor Singh, yes, please go ahead. So, how do you see this event?
I think lately we have noticed that Prime Minister has been very successful in engaging Indian diaspora in all his visits. So this has now become an anticipation of wherever he goes. And people are enthusiastically waiting that the event like this would take place. And the size of the event very often makes the local leaders feel very inclined to not just be there with the Indian Prime Minister, but actually, introduce him in fairly elating terms, as we saw today happening in Sydney. But interesting point that Ambassador Suri made is about the entire spectrum of leadership being available for that essentially an Indian community event. And the fact that the Prime Minister, who said this is completion of 1 year in office for him, also mentioned that he's met Indian Prime Minister meanwhile 6 times. So the frequency of international gatherings where Indian Prime Minister is seen present and engaging these world leaders is something that creates not just the bilateral mutual chemistry between those leaders, but also leaves a very significant impression on Indian diaspora in those countries, making them feel proud of engaging with Indian leader and asserting their identity of being Indian or people of Indian origin in that sense. And that is why the enthusiasm in that stadium that you saw today. And finally, of course, interesting to see how, meanwhile, after 2014 visit of Indian Prime Minister, I think there are 4 visits by Australian Prime Ministers. One, of course, online summit meeting that took place between 2 Prime Ministers. So the intensity and frequency of Prime Minister's engagement with top leaders around the world, but at the same time with people on the street, Indian diaspora, and front-loading Indian cultural connections. And that is where the Little India being finally agreed upon to be coined in that terms, and makes it very, very emotional movement for those Indians who are sitting there. For long years, they have been kind of trying to find their feet in those countries, find their identity in those countries. But today, they are able to assert their Indian identity with a lot of pride, I think, and in that sense, the visibility and to a great extent credibility of Indian Prime Minister contributes to that enthusiasm that one notices in all these diaspora events that Indian Prime Minister makes sure in engaging Indian community wherever he goes.
Right. And that has done that to very, very successfully, to the greater extent, the kind of reactions that we've picked up from the business magnates and the captains of the industry in Australia and the meeting that with the Prime Minister. Professor Singh, I'm sorry, we're really running short of time, but your last words here. I have to wrap up the discussion. What makes this visit of Prime Minister Modi extremely, extremely significant for the Australian side? Because we have talked about the spectrum of leadership cutting across party lines, attending this event, which by the way was a community event, and it turned out to be much bigger than that. Professor Singh.
Expectation in Australia is that the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement could now move to next step of comprehensive economic cooperation between 2 sides, and that is supposed to facilitate trade and take it to up to 70, 75, even $100 billion as the expectation is from the Australian side. And of course, India is very attractive for Australians because India now is the 5th largest economy, going to be 4th largest. Prime Minister did underline all the levers that India today has that makes India extremely attractive to Australians. For example, he talked of resource and capability, and he talked of India being youngest and biggest talent factory and a whole lot of other things. Fundamentally, pushing Australians to open up, for example, for professional Indian diaspora to go from here and find opportunities in Australia. So I think increasingly India's own weight is increasing, and I understand China is a factor. China is a factor that makes Biden ask for, for example, autographs from Prime Minister, or Australian Prime Minister calls him boss, etc. I understand there is a certain, indication of co-opting India in that sense, but India itself has huge
That's the
weightage and
visual.
attraction.
That's the visual that's going to remain in the memories of, I mean, at least the Indian diaspora and Australia as well. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Ambassador Suri. Thank you so much, Professor Singh. That's all we have time for right now on Newsnight. Thank you so much for joining us.